Oh, another day in quarantine. Guess I'll just watch some YouTube. Huh. At least this ad's pretty funny.
Other countries have couches exactly like yours. Well, not exactly like yours. Go and smell the roses.
I think I will do that. Now, I know what you're thinking. Mr. Bonanno, that's an apple, not a rose. And you'd be right. It is an apple. But the apple tree, and rose are all part of the same family, the rose family, or Rosaceae, which means when I smell this, I am actually smelling a rose. We're going to learn more about the rose family and the members that make it up, as well as a few other local families on this week's Science Fridays. Roses can come in quite a lot of different forms. One of the forms is a tree, like this cherry tree here, which is a part of the rose family. One of the biggest identifiers and most obvious identifiers of a rose are its leaves. When you look at a rose's leaves, you're always going to see a serrated edge. What that means is you have jagged, sharp points along the edge. No matter what kind of rose you're looking at, it's going to have that feature. Another feature, characteristic of roses, are the flowers. When you look at a rose flower, you're going to see 5 petals and quite a lot of stamens on the inside. Now you might think, I've seen rose bushes before and they have tons and tons of petals. Isn't that what makes them look beautiful? And they do. They're kind of an exception. Humans have actually bred those garden roses to turn these stamens, which are the male parts that produce pollen, into petals on the outside. And in fact, in some cultivars, they've done that so much that bees actually can't get in to pollinate because there's so many of those petals. Let's take a look at another rose example. Another fruit you might be familiar with in the rose family is the apricot. Apricots grow on trees, and they can show another feature that most roses have, which is a drupe. That's the name of the type of fruit that they have. A drupe is a fleshy fruit which surrounds a hard pit. Not all roses have drupes. We'll take a look at one that doesn't. Right here is another example of a rose that you've probably eaten before. If you look at its leaves, you can see those serrated edges. One difference is going to be that this has compound leaves, which means each of these are, instead of being leaves, are leaflets, and the cherry tree is going to have true leaves. Another difference between cherries and apricots, which we saw before, are the fruits. Strawberries, as you can see on these immature ones, have many, many little seeds on the outside and then fleshy fruit on the inside. That means we call these aggregate fruits because there are a bunch of seeds, which are the actual fruit of the plant, on the outside and all attached to each other. So they aggregate together to make one superfruit, if you will. These guys don't have any petals anymore because the fruits have already started to develop, but if we were able to see the petals, we would see 5 white petals on these guys like you would expect from a rose. Let's move to our next family. So right here we have a very typical example of a member of the family Asteraceae, or the daisy or sunflower family. It's a pretty distinctive family because it has big flowers for the plant size. So think sunflowers, right? Those are pretty huge flowers. The thing is that big flower is actually many, many flowers. So if you look closely here, we have actually a bunch of tiny flowers in the center all packed really together. So when you look at one flower, it's actually quite a few hundred flowers. And each of those would end up making a seed, like a sunflower seed. So sunflower seed is attached to one flower only. In the inside, we call those flowers disc flowers, and these petals on the outside are actually other specialized flowers called ray flowers, and they make these petals on the outside to help attract insects to it. So whenever you see an aster, you're going to be able to recognize it easily because it has a bunch of flowers in the middle and these ray flowers on the outside. A lot of them come in yellow too. Here we've got another example of one of the Asteraceae family. This one would be closer to what you might call a daisy, since it has the white ray flowers on the outside. Remember, we call those white petals on the outside ray flowers. And on the inside, it's got the yellow disc flowers. Those are the flowers that make up the actual flowers of the plant. You can see here there's a few pollinators visiting these guys. They kind of go over and reach down into each of those disc flowers to try and find some pollen and nectar in there. And even though I'm not sure exactly what species this is, I can still tell that it's part of that same family because of those characteristics. Those ray flowers and disc flowers making that one big compound flower really give the Asteraceae away. So as I was coming back from looking at a couple of other plants, I noticed this really cool purple flower that I don't know what it actually is, what it's called. But using my family identification skills that you're learning, we can try to figure out what this is related to at least. If we look at this, we can see a bunch of those little yellow marks in there. Those are a bunch of stamens, which means that there are multiple flowers on the inside of this seemingly big flower. Right here we've got petals that are raying out, which means we've got ray flowers at the side. And remember, in our other asters, we have disc flowers in the middle. So this is probably going to be part of the family Asteraceae. Now, knowing what family this is going to help us figure out what this actually is. If we know that it's an aster, we could say purple aster, Northern California, coastal oak woodland, and then maybe we're able to figure out what it is. So knowing a bit about the family that a flower generally lives in or is a member of is going to help us figure out what it actually is to make that further identification to the species level. So knowing something in the family level can help you get to the species. By now, I think you can tell what plant family this is going to be a part of. If we look here, we can see we have our ray flowers on the outside and our disc flowers on the inside. So yep, this is going to be a member of the sunflower and daisy family, or Asteraceae. This plant in particular is a group of plants we call mule ears, and you can see by those fuzzy leaves down there why we might call it that. Some members of this family have even bigger ears than that. So keep a lookout for these really cool asters when you're out hiking. Another example of the family Asteraceae is this here, California sagebrush. You're going to be able to find this plant all over the open spaces in the area. Now, it doesn't have the flowers. In fact, all of the flowers from last year are dead. You can kind of see on here a little bit of those flowers that used to be there, but for now we can't really see those disc flowers and ray flowers arranged around them, so you kind of have to just take my word that this plant's part of the family. Once it blooms later in the year, then you'll be able to look for yourself and look at those flowers and say, yep, that's totally an aster. For now, you just kind of have to identify this plant. So some of the things that are going to help you identify it are these leaves. The leaves are these very spindly, branching things. And the best thing to identify this plant by is the smell. So if you take a little bit, rub it between your fingers, and give it a sniff, it's definitely one of the best smells you'll smell out here. And that's the best trait to be able to identify the California sagebrush. Right here, this black sage, or Salvia mellifera, is a member of one of my favorite plant families, the mint family. The mint family is one of my favorite plant families for a few reasons. The first is its square stem, something pretty strange in the plant world. You probably know stems as being round, but every member of the mint family actually has a square stem. The other really key feature for anything in the mint family is the smell. If you've ever tasted or smelled mint, you're going to know what I mean. Now, sage doesn't have the same exact smell as mint, but it's still going to have a really, really nice odor. The final thing that's going to help you identify a member of the mint family is the leaf pattern. So anything in the mint family is going to have opposite leaves. So that means the leaves are going to be opposite each other on the stem. It's also going to have simple leaves. So that means right here we have the leaf coming off, and it doesn't split into any smaller members like we may have seen in the California sagebrush. So very simple leaves, opposite of each other on the stem, and as you move up the stem, they're going to be in an alternating arrangement. So what that means is that we have leaves going right and left. When we move up to the next node, remember a node is where the flowers, branches, or leaves come out. We're going to have down and up leaves. When we move up again, we'll have left and right leaves, and then again down and up leaves. It's going to alternate those simple leaves like that as we go up. So for anything in the mint family, which hopefully we'll see a few other members of, most likely sage like this, we're going to have square stems, a nice odor, and simple alternating leaves. If it has those three traits, then it's probably a mint. Right here is a plant you probably recognize as the California golden poppy, our state flower. Being a poppy, it's part of the family Papaveraceae, or the poppy family. Some of the things that can help you identify a poppy are going to be alternate leaves, which means the leaves don't actually match up right across the stem. They're going to be just a little bit offset, in some cases really offset. Most poppies, too, are going to have leaves that branch out quite a lot, like this. In addition to those leaves, the stamens are another very distinctive part. You're going to see many, many stamens. Remember, that's the male part of the plant where the pollen comes from. The final and most distinctive part about these plants is going to be this seed pod right here. So these long structures are the seed pods of the plant, and they are going to dry out over time as they mature, and eventually they'll dry out so much that they'll actually split and crack. When they split and crack, it's actually a pretty fast motion, and it flings the seeds all over the surrounding area. So when you see this patch of poppies right here, after this summer, they're going to spread their seeds all around this whole area, and this poppy patch is going to keep growing. In June or so, when this happens, if you come near one of these plants, they say you can actually hear the sound of those cracks. So next time you see some poppies in the wild in the early summer, listen closely and see if you can hear the sound of these pods exploding all over. This plant is part of the family Fabaceae. Fabaceae is a family you probably know some members of, because this is the family of beans and peas. We have a lot of food and a lot of the world that's relied on the food from these guys. They're pretty easy to identify by their leaves. Whenever you see a fab leaf, you're going to see what is called a compound leaf. So right here, even though we see all of these little bits, which you might call leaves, these are actually what we call leaflets. So that means this whole structure is the leaf. So we've got a compound leaf right here. So this whole thing is one leaf, and it has what we call stipules. So we can see these almost like mini leaves coming off right where the bud was. So you're going to see stipulate compound leaves is going to tell you that you've got a Fabaceae by the leaves. Usually the flowers are going to be in rows like this. And then one of the most distinctive things, which I can't find on this plant, is going to be the seed pod. So you've probably seen a pea pod where it's one long tube where there's a bunch of seeds inside. And that's going to be all Fabaceae have pods like that. So these guys are pretty cool. Next time you eat a bean, remember you're eating something from the fabulous Fabaceae. In this one, we can still see we still have what we call pinnately compound leaves. So we've got all of these little leaflets, those compound leaves. So each of these are not their own leaf. This whole structure right here is going to be a leaf. But as you'll see, this one has kind of a special trait to it. It's this big circle, all coming from the same place. All of those pinnae, or leaflets, come from the same spot. That means, just like the palm of your hand, this one's a palmately compound leaf. Palmately compound leaves are mainly found in the group lupins, so they're part of that Fabaceae family, but they have some extra traits which set them apart from the other fabs. We also know that this is a part of the Fabaceae because of these seed pods here. Now, they're not super long like pea pods, but if we break these guys open, inside we can find we've got a couple little seeds in there. So eventually these would dry out, and just like the poppy, these are going to crack open and drop their seeds onto the ground. Not as dramatically as the poppy, though. So again, the things we can tell that this is a fab are from the leaves being compound leaves and these seed pods. The last family we're going to talk about is one that covers pretty much this entire hillside behind me. It's the family of grasses, or Poaceae. You're probably pretty good at actually identifying this family already. When you look at a grass, you can tell it's a grass pretty easily. Some of the things that let you know that it's a grass are going to be its leaves. We always say blades of grass, and that's because leaves of grass look like blades. We can also tell that it's a leaf of a grass because it has parallel venation. That means the veins inside the leaf are going to run parallel to each other in the same direction from the stem out to the outside of the leaf. These guys are actually flowering plants, though you may not think it, and you've probably never said before, wow, that grass has a really, really beautiful flower. That's because these guys have flowers that don't attract pollinators. They're actually going to be wind pollinated, so they don't care about being nice and colorful and showy. If you look at their seeds, they're also going to be these small kernel-like things. And in fact, when I say kernel, that's because corn is part of this family. So it's going to have these small kernel-like seeds, which are actually edible in pretty much every grass species. Some members of this family that you've probably ate this morning were wheat. You probably ate corn in the past week as well. You may have eaten some barley, rice. There's tons and tons of stuff that we eat in this family. So next time you're eating something, think about, am I eating that grass outside? You probably are. Well, I'm glad I followed that gnome's advice and went and smelled the roses. I hope you guys enjoyed learning about a few of the plant families you can find in the area where we live. Next time you're on the hike, try and see if you can identify any of those families that we saw today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next week for another Science Fridays.